Today, we learn that you can be mildly successful and still have a great time, and that the spirits world might be quietly teaching us something the tech world forgot. I'm joined by Mike Solo, co-founder of 99 Proof Partners and Cask Strength, his investment fund and his venture debt arm. Mike's been a mentor and advisor to over 500 entrepreneurs along the way, and I dig into what he's learned. We explore the prideful pull of the maker movement. Don't everyone just quit your jobs and start a bourbon company? And we chat about different types of success and how to take some pressure off of yourself. 99 Proof is doing capital differently. They get in the boat with the founders instead of just writing checks and managing spreadsheets. A story of investing that puts the craftsperson first. If you want to taste what we're talking about, check out some other brands such as Still Austin Bourbon, Renee Gin, and Siempre Tequila. Please welcome Mike. Mike, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Last time we talked, I got really excited about the space that you're in because you get to interact with folks who are leaving their traditional day job, corporate world to enter the world of spirits, which is, it's craftsmanship, right? It's craft and passion and all that. And I'd love to understand this, like, what do those people look like and what are you learning from them?
It's a totally different room every time you walk into it, right? It's a different story each time. You know, we see everything from, on one end, like the familial experience. It's been passed down to them through, maybe multiple generations. Definitely like in the tequila sector, you see that. And then there's others that are just like career long. They've been a bourbon guy and they enjoy it. They know everything about it. They've walked the bourbon trail, 50 times. And they want to try their hand at it. Maybe they've gotten a little pocket still for down in the basement or in the backyard or something. And, they're trying to take this thing to the next level, maybe circle some capital for it and make that their full time. So we definitely see it all. It's what's interesting to me really about it. When you get these people on the phone, there's always this very prideful mentality around the business they're building, the thing that they're making, the craft behind it. I spent a good deal of time in software and, there was a little bit of that there, but it's nothing like this. It's nowhere near as pronounced. Every time you get to have the opportunity to like hear these people tell their stories, it kind of sucks you in even more. It's very cool.
What do you see in them commonly that tells you this person's going to be successful? A lot of people have the idea that they want to start a spirit. Very few do. And then, I don't know the stats, but I don't know that all that many are successful. Maybe you could tell me, but what do you see?
Yeah. Anybody will tell you like the last couple of years there's been a market correction. And so that's made it harder for the smallest of the small businesses in this space as well. So that kind of, maybe that's a straw that's breaking the camel's back, if you will. Many businesses, sector agnostic, many businesses that are in alignment with the story that I just told you, right? Where it's like a crazy dream and, maybe they know something about it and maybe they don't, or they're going to learn it on the fly. There's truthfully not a ton of those businesses become, wild success stories. Our advice is always to, crawl before you walk, to do as much research, to partner with the smartest people that you can find, the people that have kind of walked this path already. And maybe they don't have it in them to start the business. They're not going to be that person, but they'll get on once the train is already in motion, fine, So there's this kind of chasm at the very beginning that some of these people with the crazy passion, dream kind of scenario, they can satisfy that tranche, that growth period. There's not a ton of them in our sector or in many sectors that become this cover of Forbes, success story, but there are plenty of them that become a serviceable, scalable business, and then it becomes an execution risk. Where do these people want to take it? Do they want to hold on to it forever and, have their kids run it, or, they want to IPO or, whatever the business plan, looks like for them? Then you kind of branch off into 100 different directions. It is hard to run a profitable business in this sector. It's hard to run a profitable business in lots of sectors. I wouldn't necessarily just put that on beverage alcohol, but I would say, a penny's worth of free advice to anybody that's kind of thinking about jumping off and doing this is to really become a student of profitability and understand, those risk factors so you can set yourself up to be sustainable for a while without having to go out and raise enormous amounts of capital in order to stay in business.
Yeah, and be realistic. This industry's somewhat unique, and like every founder has passion in what they're founding, right? But in this, I feel like there's this romance and a lot of love and passion, and like literally something that alters your mental state, right? And so, like as an investor, I'm assuming you love to see some of that passion, but like, can someone love it too much, and does that get in the way of it? Like, how do you thread that needle?
Maybe the way that proliferates is like, if anybody out there has ever, been raising money and they get negative feedback, and you have don't talk negatively about my baby kind of like feeling. Maybe that's kind of what we see, right? Where like we've seen some very competent, very well-regarded master distillers that have gone out and, tried to start their own business versus being the master distiller, of somebody else's enterprise. In that instance, there are maybe a few more working examples where maybe they're spending too much time, effort, money, cycles, building their equipment by hand. Hand forging is still a massive thing, and that's threatening to bottom out the business because it takes so long, so much capital, and so on. Almost all of them will tell you, like, my liquid's the best liquid, or there's some, version of that, right?
My baby is the most beautiful baby, of course.
Absolutely. But then, they go out and, maybe they get silver instead of gold medals at some award, San Francisco, whatever. And so they start to kind of get their nose bloodied a little bit, and they see, really where they do fit in, across all of the different products in their category. Our advice always is to lean into where you are. There's still somebody that is going to enjoy that. Not everybody is going to buy a $200 or $300 bottle of tequila or bottle of bourbon or bottle of whatever. They're going to have a daily drinker. They're going to have something that's, $40-$50, and they're going to feel great about drinking that. And maybe they'll pour that for their buddies too, a little bit, and they'll get the special bottle out for the right kind of party that they're having too. And so there's these like drinking occasions. And so there's products that fit into all of these different categories or occasionality. And so, being able to really take a step back and hear what the market is telling you and kind of divorce my baby's the most beautiful baby piece. It's a hard lesson to learn sometimes, but the people that do it really fast, they figure out how to make money in their category, and then they can go out and, find something else or do something different that maybe gets their company and offering into that, premium category if that's where they want to play, or they can kind of pivot in that way.
Yeah, that makes sense. What I'm hearing in there is you can have all the love and passion in the world, but you got to still remain grounded in reality, accept the critical feedback and the coaching and all that, right? And maybe to your medal example, maybe the more competitions the better, because then that makes you realize where you truly stand. It's like I have so many friends that were, they were the best football athlete in high school in their town, and then they went to D1, and the first time they got hit, they're like, oh, there's a different level to this. Maybe I'll go to D2, D3 school at this point.
Right. Yeah, there's lots of different places that people can take their products these days. It doesn't even really require, getting medals. If you go out and, at a very local level, like, hit the concerts and the fairs and all that kind of stuff and get feedback that way, that's, that can be valuable. Really, it's a liquor to lips game still. That's a very common phrase that you hear in beverage alcohol. Really, it's just in alignment with getting your product out in front of enough people and seeing what happens to their face when they try your stuff, or when they see your logoing or your branding, or, do they buy the t-shirts? Do they want to interact with the brand? That is somewhat of an indicator, and, how your brand messaging is doing. So like all of these kind of community kind of things can help out, just as much as getting medals. There's lots of folks that are willing to help out and, put your stuff into an article somewhere and, start to get it out there that way. Talk about, tasting notes and all that stuff. So there's a lot of avenues for people to go and get some eyes on their product or their line of products, besides just, trying to get a medal or pay for a medal. I didn't mean to, position that as like the route to market, but
Yeah.
All of it taken as a whole, like it's helpful, and it does help the business tell the consumers of that category what we are.
Yeah. User feedback. It's, direct input. One of probably a million examples why you just need to surround yourself with people who will give it to you straight rather than candy coating it, right? And the one thing that I love that we talked about last time is you said that you can be mildly successful and have a great time, which from an investor was like, whoa, wait, we can't all just be George Clooney. So I'd love to hear maybe like elaborate on that a little bit more and maybe some examples.
Yeah, so I'll start with the latter part first and kind of get back down to it. So, there's very few George Clooney exits. There's a solid argument that can be made that there still is going to be a ton of M&A in this category, and honestly, all of it's exciting, really. So is there a $1 billion exit? Maybe not this year, but maybe we can get back to that. But six-figure millions exits, that's a thing. The scalable businesses that are built smart in a way that a strategic can come in and expand on it and catabolize the white space that hasn't already been eaten up by that smaller business. Like, that makes sense, and there's a lot of room for that in our sector. Getting down into the mildly successful and having a lot of fun piece, they're not necessarily mutually exclusive. We're lucky enough where some of our portfolio brands are kind of getting into that, sort of exciting phase where an exciting exit might be on the horizon here. At the end of the day, it's still a fun thing. It's still alcohol. It's still, bourbon, wine, champagne, whatever. It's an experiential game that we're playing. You still can belly up to the bar or go to a wine tasting and hear people's stories. You can see their faces when they're, drinking this stuff, and that make it a fun sort of almost like a party kind of environment. So that certainly is true at the lower levels, getting into you don't have to be super successful in order to have a good time here. There's something that you can see as plainly as, the smile on the business owner's face when they, pour an old fashioned using their bourbon, or maybe it's just a neat, and the person is sitting there tasting it and they're like, wow, this is really good. And they start asking them, like, tell me about what's your grain to glass, protocol, or, where's the supply come from? Or like, what makes this business unique? And they talk about all these other partnerships that they have with the farms nearby and what they do with their byproducts. And, you're still a small business, and, telling your story is vital to the market kind of understanding who we are and who we want to be when we grow up.
Yeah, and those are the lifebloods of the communities and the country more so than the George Clooney brands out there, right? Like, that's what's really keeping things moving along.
100%. And I would be remiss if I didn't say, like, it's not all sunshine and roses out there, right? Like, there's still a market correction that many would argue kind of like has to happen. There's a couple thousand, bourbon brands out there in the U.S., and maybe there's not room for that many. That's going to finish shaking itself out, I think, over the next, 12, maybe 24 months. Competition, pushes out some that are not as well positioned to be competitive, but it also pushes those who are very competitive and some will to be competitive, kind of pushes them forward. So, ours is an industry that's also seeing that happen today.
Yeah. I just always love to compare different industries. And so in software, you see a lot of serial founders, right? They exit, they do it again, rinse, wash, repeat. You mentioned just before, someone in the spirits world doing a second exit. But my impression, and correct me if I'm wrong, like, I feel like there's much fewer serial founders within the spirits world. Is that correct?
It's all relative, right? It's relative. I mean, this is a smaller market. It's 80 plus billion. The entry exit timeline and trajectory is faster in software than it is in alcohol. Some of the efficiencies that have kind of dragged that down historically, some of those are now able to be capitalized on. There's, easier production partnerships to get, or, depending on the spirit category, there's a lot of supply of this and that. So, there's some ease to market now that used to not exist as much. And so being a newer founder or even a second founder, now you've been there, you've seen it, now you know exactly what the roadmap looks like. And so turning around and walking down it, a lot easier. In BevAlc, you're just leveraging the same partnerships almost. Just rinse, wash, and repeat that, and you're in the market. What we don't see is sort of like a cross-pollination where somebody was like making like Ukrainian vodka, and then they come in and they're making Japanese whiskey next. Like that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So they do kind of stay in their lane more. In tech, it seems like there's a little bit more kind of cross-pollination across different product types or product categories. And I would probably argue that that allows for more founders and more rapidly founding than in something where maybe you're gonna want to have your own distillery this time, right? So that's a pretty capital intensive program to put together. So
yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk capital. You seem like you're holistic capital. You sound and feel different from a lot of other investors that I talk to. Curious to just hear from your mouth, like what is the philosophy and the approach?
First off, my founders, really in anything that I'm a co-founder of now, we've all been there before. I think it's an important distinction to make. I mean, if you're talking to the folks that own the fund, then regardless of the size of the fund, they do understand what it's like to own a business. Our guys are those people. So
you're not just spreadsheet guys.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got to be that, or you can't, do decently well in this industry. But, first and foremost, we understand how rugged it can be to raise capital and what it is like when you're not raising it. We've had successful businesses. We've had total Fs. We've actually been there. And so capital it's always going to be important, but the execution risk is a key component to any firm's due diligence. It's also something that intrinsically it's hard to measure how successful these folks are going to be this time when they execute. Even if they've been a founder in the past, there's lots of founders that have become repeat founders that didn't make it the second time. Did they learn enough the first time? Was that a lightning strike, or is this really, who they are? Are they the lightning in the bottle folks that are, just good at building? I think we're getting better at learning how to discern the difference between the lightning strike and the lightning in the bottle. But nonetheless, that's definitely something that kind of keeps us up at night, and our compatriots, our folks that we do deals alongside, kind of echo that sentiment, at least when we talk to them. We help make introductions to other funds, to other sources of capital, high net worth investors, importers, exporters, software providers, distributors, salespeople, teams of salespeople, brokers, they're called in our sector, other brands that are currently going through the same thing, and maybe they want to share salespeople, so they have like a co-marketing strategy for a given sales geography. Whatever it takes in order for them to be successful. I would say, if anybody that's listening to this is thinking like, wow, it's kind of an interesting approach. The way that we kind of look at it is, we get to see into a lot of different silos. And we talk to other sources of capital. We talk to our investors. We talk to each other. We talk to a lot of brands that are here in the U.S. and internationally. Folks that are conduits that go between, any of these different businesses. And, so we get to pick all of their brains and see what keeps them up at night. And there are often partnerships that are at least potentially, on the table and could be successful partnerships. And so we try to leverage those, get any of those balls onto the field of play, if you will, with any of the brands that we're making an investment in, definitely. But then really, even ones that, we think could be a future investment, we'll do the same thing. We'll pick the phone up and make an intro or, whatever it takes.
Yeah, that's great. I, through all of the brands that you work with and all these conversations that you're talking about, and even outside of that, your other mentoring activities, I don't know if you have a tally on the number of entrepreneurs that you've advised. It's probably a lot. Are there like one or two common conversations that you find yourself always having or having a lot of with them? I
mean, I stopped counting at like 800 companies, founders that I've had even just like a one-on-one mentor style conversation. I used to be a mentor at some of the incubator, like startup kind of environments in Dallas and in Texas. And so a lot of the numbers like came out of that, like once or twice a month, just having office hours for, 3-4 hours a week, something like that. We're in the earlier stages where they're maybe pre-launch into maybe seed round kind of companies. It's almost always around raising capital, the metrics that we need to accomplish in order to successfully raise capital like the next time, and like how do we talk to investors about us and what we're doing. There's always a pitching, kind of component to the conversations that we have. Pitching is just like an awkward thing.
Yeah.
Some people are very good at it, and they just get it, how to talk to people in this way that kind of disarms them. They like get out of the way between them and a check. Kind of going forward from the like smaller piece into the like more scalable businesses that are trying to then begin activating their exit strategies. And in our sector, exit strategies aren't like 1-year things. So you make the plan, you put the plan onto the field, and then you've got to prove numbers for at least a couple of years. There's these articles that come out that talk about, the exits, whatever the exit is at the time. And they're written as if it was this like flash in the pan deal where, strategic, like just found this company, and, the company had only been around for 6 months, and, now it's a $400 million. No, there's like 10 years before that where this business was building. And so, somewhere in that 10-year period, they started activating their exit strategy, and that got them to year 10. That piece, we honestly love being involved in that. There are way different challenges there than there are at the earlier stage. And truthfully, they're very hard. Now you're talking about team building and expansion across the U.S. Maybe it's international, and so efficiencies there, and you have logistics and supply chain issues and potential, to extract additional, value. And there's inventory that kind of factors into this, both how do you manage it, and then building it up enough so it has value to an acquirer. And so there's all of these things that at the beginning you didn't really have to worry about them that much. And so on our end, we're involved in any of those things. From me personally, the advisory work that I do and like sitting on the boards and that kind of stuff, those are totally fun, hard, challenging conversations to have, and, research projects, if you will, that we have to put together as a team, monitoring them, the checkpoints that you institute, to use along the way. And so like all of the processes and tools that you have to have in order to, to successfully traverse that part of the business growth is, it's the best problem to have.
Yeah, it's exciting. I remember I really underestimated the timelines in the spirits world. We started working with one of the on the supplier side, one of the oldest, biggest bourbon distillers, and it hit me like a brick. They're like, "Well, we think in terms of 40 to 50 years in our planning," and I was like, "Holy cow! Is that different from software?"
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, you see it in other spirits categories too, where it's like the granddaughter or grandson of the person who started the distillery is now the master distiller. And so, of course, now there's, a 40-year bottle of whatever scotch, that you can offer to the market. But also, this business has been around that long. There's instances where just somewhere along the way that distillery decided to sell, and there's an argument could be made that there's always a strategic that would want a distillery that has proven their market worth for that length, that they would want them as part of their, portfolio of assets. So there's tons of exit opportunities. There's even, there's mid-tier PE along the way too, that if you start a business that at a 10 mil valuation and, you want to sell it for 150, there's hands full of shops that just do that, and they take that 150 and trying to turn it into 250, and they get their big win out of it too. So there's a lot of that that goes on, and and maybe those numbers maybe are a little overblown, but that thesis is also currently at work in our sector. So you don't have to build a business for your grandkids if you
Yeah, it's what we were talking about before, right? Success comes in many different flavors. The hard part is just making sure you understand what you want your flavor of success to be, and being realistic about getting there. So, Mike, I've got 2 advice questions for you to finish this off. The first one is, I guarantee there's plenty of like SaaS executives listening to this right now. They're like, "Oh man, AI is killing our industry. I love bourbon. I'm going to go start something tomorrow." What's the most honest advice you give to that person?
I would maybe give 2 pieces of advice. At first, if they come from SaaS or AI, maybe stay in your lane first. See if there's, depending on what it is that they're well versed in, which, in software that can get into the, nitty gritty details, right? So if it's something that's directly applicable to our sector, I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't say that in many ways, beverage alcohol is still run like, from a technology standpoint, like it's draconian.
Yeah.
This could be realistically, definitely when you compare it to tech, this could feel like 1989, maybe 1990. There's just not a ton of tech, exciting tech that's running our sector.
There's distributors out there with a literal clipboard and a pen and pencil, right?
100%. And there's tons of like Excel spreadsheets that are at work on the field, right? Mm-hmm. So that's, going to go away per se, but there's big data lags, there's lots of opportunity to be more efficient with the software and the tech that runs our industry. That can be applied at the distillery level, that can be applied at the distributor level, it can be applied in the warehouses, like the shipping and receiving, like all the reordering from a sales management perspective, understanding what's going on within your sales territory, sky's the limit, man. Go invent something. So, so there's that. If you do want to start your own company, I'm just going to use bourbon as the working example because it's been the working example for, a lot of this. So, if you want to be your own bourbon distiller, that's a very expensive thing. So, you've got to make sure that first off, you are all in on this thing and you've got enough, money for your family to live for a while, and you have to be good at raising money, pure and simple. If you're not good at raising money or closing people makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up, which it should, by the way, but if that is a hard stop for you, then maybe do something else, because 100% you will raise money in this industry multiple times, and you're going to have to be good at it to get the business to a point where it's self-sustaining. And it's not impossible to get to the business to be self-sustaining, but you've got to have a very realistic roadmap in order to get there. Now, there are also ways to build businesses where you're just securing product from a contract manufacturer, and that's a less capital intensive way to start this thing up. And so there's some kind of a plan for anybody. I'm just saying, you got to have the stomach for it because it can be rugged. And then you have to be able to build a good team, maybe is the third thing that you really have to consider. Because if you're going to be the product guy, so whatever goes inside the bottle, that's me. It's my palate, my taste preferences, the things that I think are quality. Then great. Hopefully there's a lot of people out there that would agree with you. But you're going to have people that go out there and evangelize this stuff and sell it and understand how to, in today's world, you have to be able to build a brand. You have to be able to have the consumer identify with your company somehow. You've got to be like the Apple or Patagonia and of this industry. And so that's where people are very successful at that like local area level where we were talking before about having people come in and sit around their bar at the tasting room and then they get to tell them like who they are and they can road test that stuff. But at some point, you've got to have somebody that can use a much larger megaphone to get that message out there because, at some point you're going to stop selling it in Dallas or you start selling it in Texas. So people in Austin, San Antonio, wherever you are, insert your state here, they'll have never heard of you. So, it's important to have a very clear-eyed vision of how to grow this thing and to get a team put together that are killers.
Yeah, that's good advice. And then the last one for you, advice that you've received in your life or career that you've personally received and implemented. What's the best advice you've received?
Most recently, I was reminded by somebody who has long since been one of my mentors to protect my time. In this line of work, it's really easy to get sucked into, down into a rabbit hole where something, it hasn't proven it deserves to live yet. I mean that in the nicest possible way. There are just so many opportunities to partner or work together or fund something or get involved in a business. And you have to be able to distill down, the opportunities that are a good fit for you, that are a good use of your time, and, are going to do the things you want them to do for your family, for your legacy. Not every business is ready for that yet. It's not a referendum on that business. It's just where that business is today. It was nice to kind of be reminded of that, because I'm a guy, for me, like how that applies to me is I see these partnerships. Like if I see something, I'm already on the moon, right? So it's easy to kind of devote too much time to something that maybe somebody better than me for that should be doing that thing, right? And then come back to me and I'll do the things that I'm good at. That was a nice reminder to stay on the rails and stay focused on the things that, are going to contribute to the legacy that I'm trying to leave and the type of person that I'm trying to be and the type of businesses that, that I'm trying to work on. So in today's world where things move really fast, I think it's important to just take a beat and evaluate it. Just make sure, like, should I be doing this now? Or maybe is somebody more, in alignment for this business than me?
Yeah, fantastic advice and a great reminder for me. So thank you for reminding me, Mike, to protect my time. And also, I really appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Thanks, George. Yeah, this is fun.